Welcome to the WDW Reflections Podcast. Here, we'd love to talk about the Walt Disney World Resort, the way we remember it, how it's changed, and why we still enjoy visiting the most magical place on Earth. So come with us on a podcast journey as we reflect on the WDW Reflections Podcast. Hey y'all, welcome to the WDW Reflections Podcast, your unofficial guide through Disney World and all things Disney memories and their connections to the parks that we know and love today. I'm Dewey, one of the hosts of the show. With me today are my podcast travel buddies, Ron and Tony. How you doing, Ron?
Yeah, I'm doing well. It's always fun to get together and talk with you guys and kind of kill the mundane and the crazy that life is right now.
And coming to us from the Big Apple, my good buddy Tony G. How's it going, Tony?
Hey, good morning, guys. I hope everybody's doing pretty well today, and thank you so much for joining us. And I just want to put these on for a second. These are pretty cool 3D glasses. And hey, look at those guys in the Goofy masks. Oh, wait, that's just you guys. Sorry about that.
So y'all may have guessed what the topic of this week's episode is. This week, Tony's going to be telling us about the history and what we're still doing with Muppetvision 3D over in what we still lovingly call the MGM Studios, but of course is known as Disney's Hollywood Studios nowadays. But that's going to be the topic for this week, Muppetvision 3D. So Tony, I'm going to turn it over to you, buddy.
Thanks, Dewey. So recently, Disney Plus began airing a wonderful new biography documentary called Jim Henson, Idea Man. It's directed by Ron Howard, and the show goes behind the life and mind of the great Muppeteer and creative genius, Jim Henson, who created some of the most memorable characters ever, and who was gone way before his time. The show led me back to rereading a biography called Jim Henson by Brian J. Jones, which I highly recommend to Muppet and Jim Henson fans for its rich detail and background stories, and its generally touching and candid moments as well. It also emphatically shared the fact that Jim was a huge fan of the Walt Disney World Resort. He would visit often and marvel at the creativity he found within. He would be inspired to dream up his own ideas of how to use the technology to take his creations even further than he ever had. And he eventually found himself longing to be a part of that greater picture rather than create a park of his own. He was extremely excited about the possibilities that Disney would offer and spent his last couple of years of his life coming close to creating something extra magical for the park. There's an interesting chapter that details the behind-the-scenes machinations behind the Disney acquisition of the Muppets. It was a negotiation that would oddly last past Jim's life and still sometimes causes a controversy even to this day. But despite those rough dealings, one of the best results of the Disney-Henson partnership is still standing in the park today. Its surroundings have changed a bit over the years. There's even been some talk about it being refurbished or possibly even replaced, as it has been running for over 30 years in its initial state. I'm talking, of course, about Jim Henson's Muppetvision 3D, the wonderfully zany Muppet movie experience that has adorned Disney MGM Studios, now Disney Hollywood Studios, since May of 1991. Those of you who may have been around in the early days might remember that Disney MGM Studios was originally set to resemble a mini Hollywood, kind of a working studio theme park experience where guests could go behind the scenes of their favorite movies and experience them in new and exciting ways. Now, we've talked before about mixing some of the other plans for mixing the Muppets into this park. There was once a dream of a Muppet version of the Great Movie Ride, for example. There was even a live stage show featuring costume performers that were so larger than life, and it was called Here Come the Muppets. But the one that fit best into the theme, and currently remains as the throwback to the original theme of the park, is Jim Henson's Muppetvision 3D. The attraction itself is fairly simple, but the experience, especially since it comes from back in the day, was pure and true to the spirit of the magic of the Muppet Show.
Welcome to Muppetvision 3D.
Jim Henson's Muppetvision 3D. Get a taste for unique fun that bubbles over with excitement.
Upon entering the Muppet Studios building, we are immediately immersed into Henson's world, into a historically decorated studio and prop warehouse with comedic touches at every corner. I once took a behind-the-scenes tour at the real Paramount Studios in Hollywood, and one of the stairwells and offices was almost exactly the same as the one that we encounter when entering. In the early days, the attraction waiting area featured a lively behind-the-scenes look at the preparation for the show, as construction workers, Muppet performers, and the show's PA, Scooter, hurriedly run around to prepare the show. There are sight gags, special appearances by the likes of Fozzie and Gonzo and Sam the Eagle, Miss Piggy. There's even a bit of corporate sponsorship for Kodak. Once we're done with the pre-show, the audience is led into a huge ornate auditorium decorated to resemble a real-life version of the Muppet Show stage. Up in the stage boxes, live animatronic versions of Statler and Waldorf sit and heckle the audience before and after the show and remind you to throw on your 3D glasses as a live orchestra of Muppet penguins rises from the pit to play the music. The 3D movie itself was groundbreaking for its time. Jim was very much into exploring new technologies, and the effects vary from being kind of cheesy, although knowingly so, to dazzling. The effects were actually four-dimensional because you could smell them, feel them, as well as see them. Highlights for me include the hilarious Muppet interactions which come to life on screen. Gonzo goofs around with a sign that says 3D and points it menacingly into the audience. Fozzie pulls out a bunch of 3D gags, including a pie that dangles over the audience and gets heckled by Statler and Waldorf for doing that. We go behind the scenes and visit Muppet's Science Lab, where Dr. Benson, Honeydew, and Beaker create a new 3D character that comes to life.
I'm Waldo, the spirit of 3D!
Miss Piggy gets in on the action by trying to do a production number, but loses her temper when Beaner Bunny ruins her shot. She banishes him from the set, leading to a wonderfully inventive scene in which the Muppets, both on screen and off, search for the bunny, who is eventually found in the balcony of the very audience that you're sitting in. Sweetums, a large life-size costume monster, comes out into the auditorium from the screen, live, to search for him. Sam the Eagle presents a musical salute to all nations, but mostly America, a production that culminates in an explosion caused by the mischievous Waldo, which leads the Swedish chef, who is reprising his role from the Muppet movie as the projectionist, to blow up a wall of the theater stage, which exposes, amongst other things, park guests walking by in the background of the old MGM Studios. There's even an appearance by Mickey Mouse.
They'll never recognize me now!
The Muppets themselves are performed by the original performers, including Jim Henson, who completed the movie shortly before his death in 1990. The film itself was shot on the sound stages where 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea was filmed. Although the attraction might seem a little dated for today's audience, it still remains one of the true testaments to the mind of one of our creative geniuses. It was one of the first attractions I got to experience during my very first visit to MGM Studios back in June of 1991, barely a year after Jim's passing. I remember sitting by the Miss Piggy fountain and reflecting on how Jim's spirit was truly kept alive with this experience. It not only incorporated the Muppets into Walt Disney World, it also stands as a reminder of what the park itself was originally intended to be. I do hope it finds a way to continue to exist for future generations.
So one of my favorite parts at the close to the end of it, and you touched on it, is the finale when Kermit says, you know, "Hey Sam, are you ready for the finale?" And he goes, "It's a glorious 3-hour salute to America." And Kermit goes, "You got a minute and a half." It just
there's so many funny moments
because it's like, you know, Sam Eagle's like, "I'm ready. This thing's 3 hours long," and Kermit's like, "Got a minute and a half." And my family, oh my gosh, dude, my family just, I'm literally laughing, you know, falling out of my chair And my family just looks over at me and like, you've seen this thing 137 times. Why are you laughing? I'm like, because it's hilarious.
There was one. My father-in-law used to love this one. There was one time he sat there literally 5 times in a row. In fact, by the third time, I just sat outside by the fountain because I was like, I can't see that many times. But he just wanted to keep going back in and experiencing that.
So I have these cool Imagineering field guides. These came out in 2010, and this is from the Imagineers perspective. It's the Imagineers wrote this, and it says Muppet Vision 3D is a great example of the ways WDI often combines technologies in order to tell our stories. It's truly a multimedia presentation, employing almost all the tricks we have up our sleeves. So it's got the magic of film and 3D presentation, audio animatronics in surprising locations, and like you mentioned, Tony, bubbles and water droplets rain down on us from above, fog effects, mechanical effects suggest arrows and cannonballs firing around the space, lighting effects. So this was kind of, especially in the 90s when this opened. So obviously this was developed in the 80s. This was kind of Disney using and employing all of the tricks that they had, not just the 3D movie, but all the other special effects with the animatronics. And if you really, if you stay in the theater at the end when it's resetting for the next show, you can see the arrows, going back into the walls and stuff, so it's hidden again or whatever. But it really is, to today's standards, it's not very high tech, but for the late 80s and early 90s, this thing was pretty high speed. It was pretty cool, and I still enjoy it. I still enjoy going. If I'm at Disney, if I'm at the studios, then I definitely see this at least once a trip. It still makes me laugh. I already told you that.
Yeah, I've always enjoyed the Muppets. It takes me back to my childhood when we'd watch them on TV, and you'd wait. I mean, that was back in the day. You didn't have streaming. You didn't. If you missed it, you missed it. If so, we would time when we could see it on TV. And so when we went to Disney and had the opportunity to see this Muppet Vision 3D, it just brought all those memories back at that time. And it's everything you guys have said about the production. I too have had the opportunity to go out to Universal Studios, Tony, and it's so realistic and
It is.
it's done so well. And walking into that theater, you felt like you were walking into the TV show, and it just was. I loved everything about it and the technology. Here's the strange thing. I know that we keep saying for the day that the technology was, but even today, I maybe I'm just old and grumpy and need to just realize things move on. But I enjoy that this isn't all computer generated and so well done that I mean, you don't see flaws. I don't mean it that way, but it's not perfection like you see with computers. You probably, I've not been to the Muppet Show in a while, but I'm sure the film is getting old and there's lines through it, and that some of the animatronics are off key. But at the time when it was created, everything was as perfect as it could be, but it wasn't so perfect. And it
But they kind of acknowledged it too. The Muppets themselves would kind of
right,
know that
exactly.
they knew they're doing cheap gags. They kind of like
Right.
were in on the joke.
And I don't think we could create that today.
Yeah.
And so I think there's still I miss some of that. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love going to a movie and seeing all the computer generated stuff and how we can make things happen that shouldn't be able to happen. But I think there's still something to be said for being able to make something that you can interact with that's still physical yet also technical in a film perspective. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
just think it's cool how how they really took the characters off the screen and interacted with the audience in a way that you really felt drawn into that film even more.
Well, I mean, everything, even down to the sound design, even in the theater, you get to hear the sound plays a huge part of what's going on. The orchestra rises, and there's a bunch of Muppet penguins playing it, and you kind of are convinced that's really them playing
Oh,
that music.
absolutely. If you like, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I know I'm a huge kid at art, so it's not hard to convince me that a animatronic is playing the music. Um, but that's the magic of it.
But I do understand, though, they did recently update the seats at the Muppet Theater, and apparently they may have cleaned up the movie a little bit. So I don't think you have to worry
Oh,
too much about it
wow.
being
So then
dirty.
they wouldn't do that if it wasn't going to stick around.
Exactly.
That's good because I can remember in the last couple of years, the seats were showing their age. So it's good that they've made that investment in, like Ron said, if they're spending that kind of money to replace the seats, then that it's going to be around for at least a little bit longer. So that's comforting.
There's another interesting fact that was in the book that I had read was that up until the final weeks before he passed away, Jim was training the guy who was going to play Sweetums live in the theater. So he wanted to make sure that the character himself actually portrayed him the right way. And I think that was part of the reason that we haven't seen the Muppets as Muppets too much in the theater, is because you actually need someone who's able to do it the way that they do it. It's not just a question of having a puppet. It's got to be something with a little bit of a sense of humor and quick and fun. Like they did a few years ago, they did the brilliant thing of the Great Moments in History with the Muppets. Remember that? Where
Yes.
they put that in, that little attraction in the Magic Kingdom. And
Did you
every
get to
video
see
I've ever
that?
seen of that, I'm so
I
sorry.
never got to see it, and it didn't last long. It's obviously gone now. So I was always disappointed that I never got to see that.
Did you ever get to see the Here Come the Muppets show, the live thing with the?
That was like before Muppetvision came out, and so it had to be like 1990 or
Yeah.
something. But I did not see the Meet the Muppets show, which I wish I had because I've always liked the Muppets.
We took my niece for her 5th birthday in 1981. We got to see the Ninja Turtles as well as the Muppets stage show, which I didn't really, I mean, as much as I love the Muppets, that I didn't really like as much. I don't really remember why, but I just didn't think it looked as effective as big costumed people, rather than seeing them as puppets.
Yeah, they were huge life-size
Yeah.
costumes. So I mean, you put a human inside a Kermit costume, and now Kermit's 6 feet tall. It's I can see where it maybe takes away a little bit of the I don't know, believability that there's a talking frog in front of you.
You're taking a Muppet that you think is that
See like
size
this.
and
Yeah.
enlarging this thing.
Yes.
And so you're making it like blow up balloons. And
Right.
to
It
me,
doesn't look right.
that would take away from it too.
Yeah. I think they work best as the small felt things that
Yeah.
you pop to.
Yeah.
Because, we see them as little children on Sesame Street like that.
Yeah,
So
but I know they were working on Muppetvision and wanted a Muppets presence in the park, so they rushed that out so they would have something, I guess, like a placeholder. I don't think that Here Come the Muppets was supposed to be a long a long running attraction anyway. I think it was purely just to get something get their presence in the parks, waiting for Muppetvision to come out. So all right, any final thoughts on Muppetvision, fellas?
Just that it sounds like it's going to be around and it makes me happy.
If they're investing in new seats, I'm guessing it's going to be around for a little while. So that's a wonderful thing. So I'm glad to hear that. What or who is your favorite Muppet?
Sure. I feel like I always give like Mickey Mouse is my favorite Walt Disney character. And with the Muppets, Kermit just is my favorite. He's all representative of what the Muppets are. He's just I love when he sings. I love when he talks. I love that him and Miss Piggy have a conflict always. And he's my favorite.
my favorite character is similar to Ron's. It is the original guy. I even have a little tribute to him here if you can see him. It's Kermit with little Jim. Kermit was always my favorite, even back in the Sesame Street days. Ron and I are
Yeah.
talking about it. We were like first generation Sesame Street audience here. And Kermit the reporter, Kermit being around, Kermit the host of the Muppet Show.
Yeah.
He's always been the best. And plus, he was created by and voiced by the guy who did this whole thing in the first place. I mean, I love the jokes that Fozzie makes because they're just as corny as the ones that I say. He's the host with the most. He's the one who I model myself after on this show.
I'm going to go different from you guys. So my favorite, and I had a tough time choosing between two, and they're actually right over your left shoulder. Those are my two favorites, Fozzie and Gonzo. So as we were sitting here and you guys were talking, I decided I needed to pick one of them because it's got to be a favorite. So I think I'm going to go with Gonzo. I think Gonzo's my favorite. I like the wild card. I like the unpredictable. I like the just kind of out of control sometimes, and he just makes me laugh. And I promise you, it probably at least once a week, someone will say something, and my response to them will be, I'll say forever, like he does in the show, because he's like,
Hey, could you give me a sandwich? Would any of you people like anything? I mean, since he's going out, he could forever.
Bean says, I'm leaving forever. And he's like, can you get me a sandwich?
Give
And
me a
he's like,
sandwich, yeah.
Forever. I say that at least once a week. So for that reason, I'm going Gonzo as my favorite Muppet. So that's good stuff. I love me some Muppets.
Hey, I got a question. I know that he is part of Sesame Street, and now his name's not coming to me, but the one that lives in the trash can,
Oscar.
Oscar the Grouch.
Oscar, is he part of the Muppets?
Not those
He's a
Muppets, but
Sesame
he is a
Street,
Muppet.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they're all Muppets, right? If the
Right.
characters created by Jim Henson and his group are all Muppets, but they weren't like on the Muppet Show.
Yeah, I can't
Oscar
remember if
and-
Oscar was ever on the Muppet Show.
He
Not
might
that I
have
know
guest
of.
starred. I think he
Yeah.
was in one of the movies. But one of the things that the book talks about is how when Eisner was trying to buy the Muppets from Jim kept insisting not the Sesame Street ones. And Eisner would keep in the meetings that they were into, he'd go, okay, well, we can have Big Bird. They called it the Big Bird Project. And Jim would be very upset about that because like, you're not getting Big Bird, you're not getting Oscar, you're not getting Ernie and Bert. Those are the Sesame Street. Those belong to Children's Television Workshop. Those, keep those with those. You're getting these guys.
Wow. Okay.
Interesting.
So
That's
maybe they're not considered Muppets then. I don't know.
He did consider the Muppets. It's just that he didn't want to take that away from because he was afraid of Disney taking over the corporate sponsorship for them, and they were intended for public television. So he didn't want people making money off of that.
But Oscar would play a big second.
Yeah.
All kinds of comments about the similarities between you and Oscar the Grouch are coming to my mind right now, Ron. But I'm just going to go.
He made no sense most of the time. He was angry for no reason. Just like I can go and make an opinion about a ride I've never been on.
Ron, stop. I can't help myself. And that just about does it for this episode of the WDW Reflections podcast. Please find and follow us on all of our social media accounts. We can be found on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok at WDW Reflections Podcast, and on X at WDW Reflections. We'll see you real soon.
Will you stop this foolishness?
What foolishness would you like to see?
Will you get out of here?
Yes!